The blue state exodus continues. Plus, Governor Ron DeSantis plans to take on big tech. Was there a BLM crime wave last year? And SpaceX is accused of hiring citizens first. You may have heard of Florida Man at some point. This may be a phrase that you've come across. It used to mean a guy in flip-flops with a mullet who led cops on a high-speed car chase with an alligator strapped to the roof of his Oldsmobile. But now it's anyone fleeing the tyranny of poorly run blue states in search of freedom, gun rights, and 0% state income tax. Our country was set up so that states, as you know, would be laboratories of our democracy, that states would be able to try different policies and people could move depending on what they wanted, what they liked, and how it was all going. Well, it's amazing to me that you have such a clear winner here with the state of Florida, as well as some other red states that are doing quite well. A lot of Californians leaving for Idaho, for example. You've had a big surge of people to Montana, which is actually not that red as a state, but it is majority Republican. And this is going on at a time when we've really been reliant on state governments in ways that we haven't seen in a very long time. Because of the COVID pandemic, the state's authority to take action on health matters has really made a big difference in our lives. We had been, especially conservatives, focused on the tyranny of the federal government for a very long time. But as we see, state governments can be either protectors of your rights and liberties, or they can trample on them even more. And the states that have had the most control over day-to-day life during the pandemic, the ones that have taken the most extreme measures and that have favored the leftist authoritarian point of view, are big losers in all of this. And Governor Ron DeSantis down in Florida is a beacon, dare I say, the Sunshine State is a beacon of light for the rest of the country, for what is possible, for what could have been in New York, in California, in Illinois, in many places. And he's running with it. People have been asking me, what is the future of the GOP? And I keep saying, nobody knows, which I understand is an easy answer to a very complicated question. But we still have this impeachment trial of Donald Trump coming up, which will definitively, one way or the other, tell us whether he can run for office again. And even if he were to be barred from holding office in the future, which I don't think will happen, his children will likely run for office, one or several of them. So the Trump name, the Trump brand will continue on. But there are others that you are seeing now who I think are going to be increasingly looked to for leadership in the GOP. And Governor Ron DeSantis is at the top of that list right now. He hasn't been involved in all the election disputes and all that craziness that happened after November. He was busy running his state and running it quite well. And I've experienced some of this. I've made a couple of trips now down to Florida to see what it's like to be in a place where people are largely living their lives despite the pandemic. And now DeSantis is going even a few steps further by saying that he's going to take actions that, let's be honest, should have been taken by Republicans when they had a majority in the House and the Senate and the Trump presidency, but they didn't. Big tech's control, its financial contributions to politicians, and just its overall influence on our entire system is hard to overstate. And the GOP has a lot of answers that are required at this point as to why they didn't do more. Why didn't they take action when they could have? We heard a lot of talk about Section 230. Nothing was done. Well, DeSantis is doing something. He is pointing out, first of all, this is necessary for everybody to understand. Everyone across the country needs to know that big tech is now openly at war with conservative ideas and speech. They're not going to ban everybody. They're just going to ban selectively to chill the speech of other people. You don't have to kick everybody off. You just kick off a few prominent people here and there for their wrongthink, and everyone else gets the message and they fall in line. DeSantis spoke earlier this week about this. Here's what he said. Play 13.
At the turn of the 21st century, online technology represented tools to liberate Americans from reliance on distrusted legacy media outlets. As social media proliferated over the past decade, citizens could directly connect with large numbers of people and could cut out corporate media outlets entirely. Over the years, however, these platforms have changed from neutral platforms that provided Americans with the freedom to speak to enforcers of preferred narratives. Consequently, these platforms have played an increasingly decisive role in elections and have negatively impacted Americans who dissent from orthodoxies favored by the big tech cartel.
Not allowed to break from it. Not allowed to say that you disagree with the dominant narrative, or else they punish you. And for people who think that this only affects, and I believe this has been one of the challenges on the right, because we're just less active on a lot of these platforms. Our people, so to speak, I mean, Republican voters are far outnumbered by Democrats on platforms like Twitter and Instagram, although Instagram's catching up a bit. Facebook is where you would still find a lot of conservatives, but as you know, Facebook is now as bad an offender as any of the others. But this affects you no matter what your business is. You could run a flower shop and you say the wrong thing about COVID policy, and all of a sudden you're not able, your account is shut down. Well, if you need that account to promote what your store does, you could be put out of business pretty quickly. And if you say the wrong thing, you could also end up getting a pile-on from social media, and they'll never stop that, right? They won't try to prevent people from having their lives ruined by the social media mob. So there's a lot of consequences even for folks in their day-to-day from this, no matter who you are, no matter what you do for a living. And it's deeply un-American. We need to understand that's the way we should speak about this. It is deeply un-American for companies to suppress political speech when they exist and they created themselves. I mean, they were built, they made promises around being free exchange of idea platforms. So they essentially lied to us. I mean, this was all a bait and switch. They said, oh no, as long as you don't do anything illegal, as long as you're not doing something that we could all agree is egregious, death threats, putting illegal content online, things like that. As long as you're not doing that, we'll let you share your ideas. No, then they changed because the little woke children who run these companies now, because even though they're not necessarily the ones at the top of the org chart, they're so vehement in their ideas. I mean, they're so absolutely scornful of people with different points of view that they'll just torch anyone who gets in their way, including people in their own company who try to be a little bit more adult, people who try to be a little bit more fair-minded about all of this. DeSantis telling everybody that cancellation can happen to anyone, and this needs to stop. Play 14.
Hunter Biden's story was true, okay? We now know it was true. And the typical corporate media outlets, they just chose to ignore it. Obviously, they wanted to beat Trump. They had a view on the election. They didn't want to give it any air. So we rely on social media to go around that, not let corporate legacy media outlets control the discourse and let us speak. So you had the New York Post to run it, and you couldn't get any traction. You couldn't get any reach on it because big tech put their thumb on the scale. So that was true. What they said at the time, it's a conspiracy, or it's based on hacked information. Are you kidding me? You're trying to tell me if there was hacked information that could damage me, you guys wouldn't print it? Give me a break. You can whiz on my leg, but don't tell me it's raining. You guys would print it every single day if you could. And big tech would allow it to proliferate every single day, 24/7. So it's not being done on a principled basis. And it's not, there's threats on me. And it only gets taken down if law enforcement goes and tells them to do it. Otherwise, it just stays up. They're not moderating any of that. So they haven't done a good job in it. The thumb's always on the scale in one direction, and we just need to bring some protection for folks. I really, really worry when you have a business owner that may rely on some of these tools to do small business, if they engage in wrongthink or they go to the wrong political event, then all of a sudden they can act in concert and just take you off. You need to have protection against that.
And he's not just speaking about this. This isn't just a rhetorical thing. He's going to push for action at the state level in Florida to protect people. States, Facebook and these other companies, they're operating in Florida. And so he wants the state legislature to start creating protections in that state for your data against political discrimination. I mean, ultimately, what we really have to do is wherever we can create categories or add a category of political discrimination to anti-discrimination law. And I know that some people say, no, but that's not the libertarian view, is that private businesses should be able to do. Yeah, but they can't. And that's never going to change. So we can either create protections for more people so that we have actually some hope of being able to win this political and cultural fight over the long term of free speech, or we can just continue to suffer and get crushed. So DeSantis is saying that they're going to start doing things in Florida. He wants the state legislature, to go along with this, to create protections for people from big tech. This is the beginning of what needs to happen. People ask me, how do we deal with this, or what are the next steps? We need to sue them. There needs to be financial pain, or at least the likely prospect of financial pain. That has to happen. There have to be consequences for the kinds of censorship, for the overreach that we're seeing, or else they'll keep just doing it. There was this idea, and I've been telling you this from the very beginning. Oh, don't worry. Once the election stuff is over, once Joe Biden's president, they're going to let people go back to normal. No, they're not. Why would they? They got away with it. They were able to exercise these companies in concert with the Democrats. They're able to team up and exercise power. Now their guy, Joe Biden's in office. You think they're going to back off now? You think that they really view what they did as anything other than a huge win? No. That's why you've got to have Republicans in places where they do have power and control to wield it in defense of liberty. Passivity when liberty is under assault is not a virtue. And a lot of conservatives, I think, have adopted this position of, well, just let the market speak, or, well, just let things play out and we'll see. Well, we are seeing, because that had been largely the approach, and it is a disaster. And it hurts individuals. It hurts people. It ruins their livelihoods. It destroys their business models. I mean, they kicked Parler off the internet, and people were cheering this on in tech circles as if somehow this had achieved something. Meanwhile, Facebook was more of a place where there was conspiracy hatched about the Capitol Hill riot, but it didn't matter because they were still trying to just kick off Parler. Because Parler won't play by the actual rules, meaning whatever Democrats want. Those are the only real rules. The principle is the Democrats have power and they will crush you if you don't do what they want. That's the only principle they abide by. DeSantis knows this, and he's had enough of it. Play 12.
Is this going to be a big fight in the legislative session? Hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of support. I think most folks do want protections for their privacy and their data. I think most folks want protections from being deplatformed. And it's not just being banned from Twitter or something. As we've seen, these companies can act, they can collude, they can deny you, if you're a small business, of payment processing, the ability to use email and text. So what, you go to a rally that they don't like, or you engage in wrongthink, and all of a sudden your flower business is decapitated for a month because they take action.
That is what is happening in this country. The left is a totalitarian political ideology in America right now. They don't care that you are suffering. They don't care that you don't have freedom. They advocate for more of this. They demand more of this. So we can either continue to lose, continue to be on our back, the back of our heels, and hope that somehow they just get tired of this and stop, or we can find ways to fight back. We can find ways to make these organizations, and eventually, of course, these Democrat politicians, but for now, it would be helpful just to make the companies that are doing the bidding of the far left in America, make them stop, because there's a consequence. There's a cost to what they're doing. Right now, you know what the only cost is? They win, we lose, and conservatives say they're going to retreat from public life. That's not the answer.
John, you are correct. You remember correctly. I do believe that this is unconstitutional. I think that the Constitution sets out exhaustively what times, what power the Senate has to try and convict officials. It says that you can try and convict the President of the United States, not an ex-president, not a private citizen. I think that there's no jurisdiction here, to use a legal term. The Senate just doesn't have the authority to try and convict a private citizen. The right remedy, the Constitution makes clear, is criminal proceedings in the criminal justice system. If you think you've got a private citizen that's committed a crime, that person, even if they are an ex-president, can be tried and so forth. But the Senate does not have the power to do that.
Unconstitutional actions from the Democrats now that they're in the majority in the Senate. Not a surprise, or they have a de facto majority, as you know, 50-50, with Kamala as the tie-breaking vote. So there's a part of me that's happy that they'll be making, I mean, there you had Senator Josh Hawley. Part of me is glad they'll make this argument because it's the right one. I mean, I think they're correct, and this is an abuse. But they also, because they're being forced to go to this trial, I hope the people that are speaking in favor of Trump's position on this will explain how this is all just so disruptive, pointless, and vindictive. Now, it's pointless if you're a rational person who wants what's best for the country. If you're a Democrat who's still furious about all the terrible things that happened with Trump, terrible things that happened for 4 years under Trump's presidency, then you view this as payback. It's also an attempt for the Senate Democrats and for the Democrat Party overall to enshrine a narrative of the insurrection. And the insurrection is going to be used to bludgeon conservatives and Republicans for years and years, if not decades to come, if we allow the narrative to be seized in this way. Make no mistake about it, this is one of the reasons, among many, that I was so angry on the day of January 6th as soon as it happened, and I made no, you know how I feel if you listen to the show. I was honestly enraged because I realized on every level how counterproductive, how stupid, how damaging it is, and how much it hurts the cause of conservatism and hurts the cause of Trump and MAGA and America First. Democrats are leveraging this. This is now their primary tool of ideological suppression, or their primary argument for it is what happened on January 6th. And now they want to talk more about it and get it in the Senate record that Trump was part of an insurrection. He tried to create a coup. We have to fight that on the merits, not just as a procedural matter. The Democrats are lying about this.
A question on impeachment. The impeachment managers have now laid out their case. Trump's team is leaving open the door, it seems, to arguing election fraud in the trial, to repeating the false claims that somehow Trump won the election, those same false claims that fueled the riot. Is this administration concerned that the former president's defense could incite further violence?
Well, certainly watching reactions in the country, watching the potential for violence is something that we will do closely from the White House. Across the country, no matter what prompts it, and that's something we will certainly keep an eye on. I think in this case, as you know, there have been dozens and dozens of court cases that have been debunked. The President of the United States is sitting in the Oval Office, engaging and governing the country. And obviously, we have moved forward even more than we were prior to the inauguration in proceeding in delivering on what the American people decided on in November.
Not to be mean, Jen Psaki is really the most eloquent communicator that they could find for this role. Really? Okay. It's the Democrats' choice, but shocking that this is the best choice that they could make. But anyway, there must be things that we don't really know about this, or maybe we do. The Trump team arguing about election fraud would be a bad idea. I hope they don't do it. I know that there's been some shakeup among the lawyers who were going to be defending the president at this impeachment trial. You remember the last impeachment trial, by the way? No, you don't, I'm sure. I mean, you remember it happened, right? But does anyone remember the arguments? Oh, MSNBC they were just, oh my gosh, they were all aflutter with the amazing speeches given by these brilliant legal theorists who were just going on, and people like Adam Schiff about the Constitution and our republic and all this stuff. People don't give a crap about the Constitution or a republic. Please. They're authoritarians. They don't accept individual agency and human liberty. They want to be in control. They want to tell you what to do. You do this because I said so. Or I'll send big, scary people with guns to make you do it. That's really the Democrat mentality. And here we are. So I hope that the president's team doesn't argue about the election, because this is really not ultimately about election fraud. This is all about, they're pushing all of this around the notion of Trump inciting an insurrection. And whether there was fraud or not, the insurrection aspect of it is the main line of attack, and that's going to be the main line of attack against all the rest of us. There's no way they're going to litigate in court the election. I'm just telling you this, and if you don't believe me or you're frustrated hearing this, circle back with me in a couple of weeks and see if I'm right. They're not going to be able to present anything in court that settles the issue one way or another about election fraud allegations, and it'll only play into the Democrats' hands, because right now there were lies, the lies led to the insurrection, and now they're still lying about it if they were to present that. No, what needs to happen is they should argue the unconstitutionality of this, which I think is clear, and also the way that this is being exploited and exaggerated. Why are Democrats so set on bringing this prosecution in the Senate of the former president? It's because they're trying to get as much on the record as possible, trying to create as much noise as they can around the Trump insurrection. They just want this to be in big, bold letters in all the newspapers and then all the history books. And anytime someone comes along and says, hey, I'm a conservative populist and I have a vision for the future and I'm going to fight against these leftist authoritarians and I want to make America a free country again. Anyone who says anything like that is going to be shouted down with, oh, he's advocating for the insurrection. Like, what? Yeah, that's right. They're intentionally painting with the broadest possible brush. They're smearing people. They're talking about MAGA terrorists. And I didn't even get into this. You had another former CIA guy writing in, I don't even know where it was, writing in one of the big, I think it was the Washington Post, about how we need to treat the Trump insurrection like the jihadist insurgency, global insurgency of the early 2000s. So I want us to all be very clear, as I've been saying to you, they are comparing people running around inside the Capitol taking selfies with people who drive planes full of civilians into buildings full of civilians, killing thousands of people, decapitate people on videos, who mutilate, murder, and rape and pillage on levels that are truly horrific beyond words. They're comparing those things and saying that they're the same. It's basically the same. Yeah, as Tucker calls him, the Chewbacca man, the guy who's running around with the furry hat and everything inside the Capitol, just like Zawahiri. I mean, same level of risk, same level of danger. He's like Bin Laden with a different head covering. That's really what these Democrats. This is insane. I mean, the people that are arguing this are shameful and disgusting, and I'm sure they know Trump supporters and have friends and neighbors who voted for Trump. They'd never say this stuff to their faces because they're all such little cowards. One thing that is really a common, almost defining characteristic of the contemporary liberal in America is a lot of their political beliefs are always that they're willing to share them to a friendly audience. They're willing to say it when they've got a mob around them that agrees with them. But one-on-one, all of a sudden, they become very wimpy. They really don't actually want to have to defend these ideas. So they want to call everybody who supports Trump a MAGA terrorist, or imply at least that we're all MAGA terrorists. They're not going to say that to your face, though. They are a bunch of, there's a lot of cowardice. There's a lot of cowardice on the left. And I think it's a part of the political culture in a way that we can all see. You're aware of it. Right? They don't take unpopular stands in order to defend people that they know are good and the right. No, they go along with the mob all the time. Now, that's not everybody, obviously, but it's very, very commonplace, and I think it's almost celebrated. And there's a particularly the lib beta male is the standard. You know, all these guys who kind of remind you of Pajama Boy from the Obama era. Remember Pajama Boy during Obamacare? Remind you of Pajama Boy, and they will say these things about how they need to put down the insurrection and use the FBI and use the military against all these people. But they'll never actually walk up to your face on the street and say, yeah, you're an insurrectionist. Not by themselves, only if they've got 1,000 of their buddies all, chanting about BLM or Antifa or whatever. Then they get tough. Andy McCarthy, as you know, is a guy I've had on the show many times. I've known Andy for many years. I like Andy. He's a very smart guy. He is very upset with Trump. So there are people who are on our team, so to speak, and who are good faith, patriotic Americans who are really angry about what happened with Trump. And I can understand their point of view. But here's what Andy's saying about the Trump impeachment and what he sees it as. Play 11.
This really is not a legal determination. It's a political judgment. And whether or not the impeachment can properly go forward is a question constitutionally that is left exclusively to the Senate, which is a political body, and they've obviously voted to proceed. So, I think you can make very strong legal points on both sides. I'm more persuaded by the side that says that the impeachment power was always understood to apply to people who were out of office as well as in office, but it's a debatable point. I think it's beside the point. It's a political determination.
So he's saying it ultimately comes down to whether or not the senators want to convict the president for insurrection. Even if the Trump team argues that there's an unconstitutionality to this, probably not going to carry the argument. So that's why it's also important to dig in on the claim that Trump was inciting insurrection is not true. It is a lie. It is a smear. And to call what happened on January 6th an insurrection in and of itself is dishonest. So that's how we have to fight against this narrative. We'll see who Trump has making the case in about a week or so.
These three different executive orders are about. And I want to make it clear, there's a lot of talk with good reason about the number of executive orders that I have signed. I'm not making new law. I'm eliminating bad policy. What I'm doing is taking on the issues that 99% of them, that the last president of the United States issued executive orders I thought were very counterproductive to our security, counterproductive to who we are as a country, particularly in the area of immigration. This is about how America is safer, stronger, more prosperous when we have a fair, orderly, and humane legal immigration system.
I'm not making new law. I'm just getting rid of bad policy by basically making laws. Notice the way that he tries to tell you what you see, what you observe. That's not real. That doesn't count. Don't pay attention to your lying eyes and ears. Listen to the Joe Biden talking point here. No, what he's doing is in fact creating laws, or he's taking actions that have the force of law, and he's doing it because he doesn't like what was done before, or he wants things to change and how they are now. But he's basically writing laws. That's what these executive orders are. And the sleight of hand here, where it's all of a sudden just getting rid of the bad policies of the past, well, that's just a judgment call. That's not a way of explaining how what Biden's doing here isn't in some way overreach, isn't the current president of the United States acting like doing exactly what he said he wasn't going to do back in October. You remember that? We actually probably could find that clip for you. He would say you can't rule by executive order. They had this whole Biden presidency. Remember, I've said this to you so many times. Republicans run and tell you what they want to do, and then they try to keep their promises, but they have some people who fall away, or there's, intra-party strife or whatever. Democrats for president run pretending to be something entirely different, and then they get in office and it's, we're not doing that anymore. Now that we've fooled enough people in Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania into thinking that, we care about unions really, or that we care about the rule of law or whatever it may be. Once we've done that head fake, then we get to really go to work and push the left-wing policies that we claimed during the election we had no interest in. Oh, we would never do that. Good old blue-collar Joe, he's not gonna sell you out for foreign labor. He's not going to do that. No, union guys, you can trust blue-collar Joe. No, you can't. Guys, the whole thing is a fraud. Joe Biden's been whatever he has had to be when he had to be it to get the most votes he could where he needed to. That is Joe Biden's entire political career. No one even really knows what this guy believes, stands for. If I asked you, what issue is Joe Biden most passionate about? If you knew his record, you might say making sure that credit card companies can charge usurious rates and that it's almost impossible to discharge credit card debt in bankruptcy, right? That's what Joe Biden as a Delaware senator was really passionate about, right? I mean, if I ask you what is Joe Biden all about at the end of the day, you'll hear different things from different people. Maybe they'll say foreign policy. I think Jen Psaki said his first passion is foreign policy. Amazing, because Joe Biden has been reliably wrong on foreign policy for 40 years. He's just had bad judgment. His judgment on foreign policy is awful. But his judgment on these executive orders is also terrible. Not a surprise. Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona said this about Biden's, specifically his immigration executive orders. Play 4.
President Biden has issued another round of executive orders, this time focusing on immigration. And what he's doing is he's basically reinstating the catch and release program with regard to the asylum program. So people can come, declare asylum status, they're going to be released into the interior again. He's also ostensibly trying to parole parents who got their kids into the country somehow, but are somewhere outside the United States. Those children have been largely placed in homes of relatives, many of whom are also in the country illegally. And so he's trying to get around the task force that's going on with a current legal case. These types of things create incentives for people to illegally enter the United States of America. And what that does is increase the power and strength of the human smuggling cartels, the drug smuggling cartels that are running the situation south of the border. That's where these things are. And I'm going to keep fighting against that.
He's right. What he's saying is all true. First off, we're going through the same thing all over again. Deja vu all over again, Yogi Berra. Where you had people showing up at the border claiming asylum, and there were folks like me who did research and went to the border and figured out from Border Patrol, from the cases, from the numbers that were actually coming up every day, that they were lying, essentially. That people were showing up at the border, they had been coached, and they were claiming that they faced violence in their home country, but that was just to pass a credible fear standard, and then they wouldn't show up in court when it was time to show up and explain really why they needed asylum. Right, so they were exploiting the good faith and goodwill of the American people at the border, and there was all this fighting, under the Trump presidency from the Democrats who were saying, that's not true, and we're a nation of immigrants and all this stuff. They were wrong. It was a lie. Because when the Remain in Mexico program, all of a sudden, you can still go to court to plead, your asylum case in court as a Central American, for example, but you got to wait in Mexico, which means you don't get to just go into the American interior, disappear, and never show up in court. Oh, and then all of a sudden asylum cases dropped off a cliff gee, I wonder why. Right. Democrats were lying. They were lying until it was obvious what was going on, but until we had all the data to prove what was going on, they were just going to continue to perpetuate the lie, which is what they did. And now that we have all the data, they're just acting like, oh, well, it's different now. So let's go back to the previous policy where people who show up get to claim, oh, I have a credible fear, and then they get to stay in the country, and this is an end run on the immigration system. And all the legal immigrants ask them about this. Ask them how they feel about people showing up, crossing the country illegally, because they're often doing an illegal surrender after they cross the border, and then they find themselves in the country without any restraint. They can go anywhere they want, do whatever they want, and they never show up again. But Democrats acting like we didn't learn the lessons we learned because they don't care, because they want a de facto open border. Our friend Will Riccardella of the Washington Examiner is in the mix. Go to WashingtonExaminer.com for his latest. Will, always good to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Buck. Sorry for dressing down so much here, but nobody's in the office because of COVID, so I can dress however I want.
All right, hold on a second. We got to restart. Will, this is going to go on radio.
Okay.
So don't talk about how you're dressed. Let's restart this.
Sorry.
Because if I put that on WR, they're gonna know that we taped this before, and I'm gonna get yelled at. So we gotta just.
Sorry about that.
We're doing a radio interview. You just happen to be on video. Okay.
Sorry,
all right. No, it's no problem. All right, guys. No one cares how you're dressed. Don't worry about it. All right, ready? Mark, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Our friend Will Riccardella is in the mix. He is at the Washington Examiner. He's down in D.C. going to tell us what's going on inside the Beltway. Will, great to have you back.
Hey, good to be back, Buck. Thanks for having me on.
So we were talking about a lot of things today. Well, one that's at the top of my mind is these immigration executive orders. We saw before that what they told us, which is that these are people claiming asylum who are claiming asylum for the right reasons, and they're not going to just fail to show up for their actual asylum hearing in court. That was a lie. We've already seen this. That wasn't true. That's why the Remain in Mexico program resulted in a huge drop in these asylum requests and people showing up at the border. Now Biden's going back to it. I mean, I don't see how we can view this as anything other than the Democrats doing everything they can to move us as close as possible to a de facto open border or an even more porous border.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't know if you remember during the debate when Trump mentioned coyotes and no one on the left knew what a coyote was. Well, that's a shame because whose business is going to boom are coyotes on the border. These are human smugglers. They treat people like garbage. And now their business is on the uptick because Biden's going back to all the same garbage policies that led to what Obama dubbed a humanitarian crisis on our southern border. Remember kids in cages? That happened under Obama. Biden just had to open up another migrant detention center at the border for overflow. Where do you think those kids are going to go? They're all going to go right back into these detention centers. The left isn't mentioning any of it. They've incentivized these people to come here. And look, coyotes are using Biden's words to up their client base and smuggle people into the country. This is truly pernicious. And look, they don't care about these kids. They use them. They put words in their mouth. This isn't about caring about kids. This is about getting a voter base for the Democratic Party. It's also about displacing and lowering low-income wages so that there are people, when they do raise minimum wage, it will kick a lot of people off of the rolls. They won't be able to get human capital, and they'll be dependent on government for generations to come.
It also seems like there's some effort here for the Biden administration to shield Democrat members of Congress from having to take tough votes on this, at least for right now. Why not? I mean, they have the majority in the House. They have a de facto majority in the Senate. Why not actually pass legislation if they want to change the rules in effect around immigration? They can do so, but Biden prefers to just use the pen and the phone method.
Look, they have no mandate. He has no political capital. He barely won the Senate. That was a squeaker. They lost seats in the House. Joe Biden, is already underwater in his approval rating. He doesn't have a mandate. People don't like his policies. They didn't like Barack Obama's policies, but they liked Barack Obama. People don't like Biden as much as they liked Obama, and they certainly don't like his policies. People forget Trump. Everybody really liked Trump's policies. It was Trump as his personality is what people didn't like. So, Biden's finding out pretty quickly here that governing isn't as easy as staying in your basement and campaigning. And look, this is just going to compound. People don't want these policies. His approval rate is going to drop even further. He's going to have less and less of a mandate, and it's going to be a bloodbath in 2022.
Now let's talk about where we are on this rescue package, stimulus package, spending, whatever they're calling it today. Senator Lindsey Graham, who of course was on Fox News last night, and every night he's on, he's going to get answers any moment now. He's going to get to the bottom and get the answers that we need on all this stuff. Sure he is. Here he is though, telling everybody about the spending package. Play 19.
And I do believe that this $1.9 trillion package is going to do more harm than good to the American economy. And the reason we're having this debate, the way we're having this debate, is because they have unlimited power, my Democratic colleagues. You've chosen to do this. The 10 Republicans who went down to the White House, I appreciate their effort. Maybe some good will come from that. But this process we're engaged in today makes me wonder if it was worth their time. Maybe we can pull a rabbit out of the hat and find a bipartisan compromise consistent with what we've done over the last year. If not, we're going to march down the reconciliation road. We're going to take $1.9 trillion of spending and let one party spend it.
What happens if Democrats will go forward with a $1.9 trillion spending package and do it through essentially the budgetary gimmick or trick in Congress of reconciliation?
Well, I think I've been on your show many times, Buck, and we talked about this ad nauseum, that what the Democrats did with COVID was to hijack the economy from Donald Trump. And that was so they could win the election in 2020. And that these governors, in particular, New York and California, which have tremendous economies, if you shut those down, you're going to hurt the entire American economy. This is a bail. This is their bailout. This is their way to co-opt the federal printing press. They need to balance their budgets. They don't have a printing press. They did that with the guarantee that the left is going to come in there and pay them off. $370 billion goes to states. This is just a payoff for helping Biden get into office. The rest is handouts to cronies. And look, this is their generous Medicaid funding that they have in part due to Obamacare and in part due because they're leftists who just throw money out the window. And look, you will have inflationary pressures. If the economy opens and you're throwing this money into the economy and the velocity of money picks up, you're going to have a massive problem. You can devalue the dollar. Yellen came out and said, Powell came out and said their target inflation is 2%. They're a little bit under there now. So it seems like they're willing and ready to throw money around. We'll see what happens in the long run. In particular, if things start to open, we need things to open now. That would be the best stimulus. All this stimulus crap talk is just a handout to their cronies.
Yes, and it seems like the only place where there's always a slowdown is in actually just getting money into the hands of people affected by this, right? Biden was saying it would be $2,000. Now they've dropped that down. I think it's to $1,400 was the latest number that I saw. Well, they were pushing the $2,000 in order to win those 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and now all of a sudden it's changed all over again. And really, what we see, Will, is the blue state exodus. They want to try to paper this over with money by sending a lot of federal tax dollars to Los Angeles, to New York City, and to New York and California as states.
Isn't that interesting that, they want to cut money out, giving it to the people whose businesses were forcefully shut down, everyday American people, so that they can increase the amount they give to their blue state cronies and governors and all of these people who haven't lost a dime. In fact, I think some of them got a pay increase. They have paid no price for their terrible decision making. Then they get paid off and the American people actually get less. Then people wonder why everyone's so ticked off all the time. These people are in another world. They're in another reality. And the thing is that they never pay a price for being wrong.
Speaking of Will Riccardella of the Washington Examiner, and Will, speaking of Washington, tell us what's going on here in D.C. with people demanding either being kicked off of committees or kicked out of Congress entirely for this new member of Congress from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, MTG is how people are referring to on the internet. They want the ouster of MTG. What do you make of all this?
Well, look, you have the Democrats who fight. You say what you want about them; they're fighters, and they're willing to knock her off. Look, we had Ilhan Omar. AOC just accused, Ted Cruz of attempted murder last week, and it's like it didn't happen. And all we talk about is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she's into conspiracy theories. The entire Democratic Party pushed a conspiracy theory for 3 years. When they push a conspiracy theory, they get a special counsel, a 3-year investigation, headlines, the media's behind them. When someone on the right says something kooky in a conspiracy theory, well, they get expelled. Every person in the party's labeled a conspiracy theorist. Do you see how this works? This is garbage. Adam Schiff said he had evidence of Russian collusion. Here's this guy still on it. He's a committee chair. Rep Swalwell said the same thing. The man's a kook. Then he was with a Chinese spy. And the GOP's focused on Marjorie Taylor Greene. Why don't you tell them that if Greene's expelled, we need to expel everybody who participated in the Russian collusion conspiracy theory. You all have to go too.
Well, I'm concerned as well that there's a feeling right now within the GOP that we can buy off this ascendant totalitarian left by just, if we feed the crocodile a few of our own, it'll leave us alone. This is a strategy that history and common sense should tell members of the GOP apparatus is disastrous. But I do think we're going down that pathway right now.
Oh, absolutely. The old crocodile will eat us last garbage. Look, I think a lot of these people understand that government, like the left, gives government power, right? There are Republicans who are in government. They like power too. I mean, it's seductive. So, do they really have our best interests at heart here? A huge government with a ton of power also gives the Republican Party power. That's not to say that the civil society doesn't permeate the Republican Party entirely, but it seems like they try to dismiss their constituents. They don't care about losing gracefully. They're happy to do it. They don't want to fight. And the left are fighters. They've been fighting for 100 years. They've been infecting our institutions from academia, Hollywood, the administrative state for 110 years now. That's what the progressive movement has done. And the GOP have just kind of been like, whatever. We can't say anything about that. And that's why we're in this position today.
What do you think we do about the takeover of institutions? Because that's really, for me, that's the piece here that has greatly magnified concerns over, Obama in 2009 had the Senate, had the House, and, we made it through that as a country. There was some very bad decision making and some damage done, but we made it through that as a country. But right now, when you have Biden with this, as you say, very narrow Senate majority, but a still essentially the ability to push anything they want through the Senate if they get all Democrats on board. Obviously, they still have a majority in the House. But you add to that corporate America, and it's not just social media. I mean, major companies of all kinds, major hotel chains, companies that are selling you your lawnmower, whatever it may be, they're all in on wokeness now, too. So it feels like there's a magnifying, a force multiplier effect going on right now, not only of the political victories that the left has pulled off in recent months, but also the cultural and private sector muscle that they're able to bring to bear.
Well, that's exactly right. And look what the left did when when Trump won, and we had when Republicans had the House and the Senate, and they had all three branches of government. They fought back at the state level. They all of a sudden, anytime the left loses and Republicans control more than two branches of government, federalism's a thing again. States have rights again, right? That's what we need. That's what the Republicans have to do, is fight back at the state level. They control a lot of these legislatures. They control a lot of these governorships, and they need to bog this down in litigation. Look, Donald Trump appointed over 200 federal judges. They have a case to make here in a lot of these policies and fighting back. Look, there's already starting with sanctuary gun states and so on. They don't have to support and help federal law enforcement. They don't. I mean, that's the point of some of these of federalism in the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment, is to kind of fight back against these things, and they need to take it to court. They need to fight until 2022 when they can get some semblance of the government back and reduce the administrative state. Congress needs to take back a lot of the power they handed to the executive branch. It's just become too overwhelming. So that's where they have to start.
You think DeSantis might get some traction here with his efforts to push back on big tech, specifically in his state?
Yes, I looked. That dropped last night. I haven't seen anything fly like that in social media in a long time. So yes, I think from a grassroots standpoint, that's huge. Whether or not you agree with it, some conservatives may not, and so on free speech grounds. But that's what people like, and that's what they want to share, and that's what they want to be discussed right now. Big tech is a major issue, and all of this censorship and stifling conservative voices is one of the biggest issues for conservatives right now. So, yeah, absolutely.
All right.
DeSantis is making a push for a 2024 run.
Will Riccardella, everybody, WashingtonExaminer.com. Go check it out. Will, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Buck.